there was a post that recently, sometimes I get the Instagram wisdom. You know, you every so often hit a post where you're like, wow, that really hits home. I'm glad I was scrolling in that moment. And it was this view of mountains, and they're panning over mountains. And it said, you have one person, two people that you need to make proud in your life. And it's not your mom, it's not your dad, it's not your husband, not your wife, not your kids. It is your 8-year-old version of yourself and your 80-year-old version of yourself. And I felt that was so true and powerful and made me go, yes, all these people matter in their relationship. Our relationships with them matter. But those two relationships, that's in that whisper that kind of spans that gap. That's the most important.
Yeah. Krista.
Hi.
How's it going?
So good.
Thanks for coming in here. I appreciate it.
Having me.
So you are the first official in the new official Beyond Hope Project podcast.
I feel surprised and really humbled and grateful.
Right. I didn't want to put that extra pressure on you. I mean, the millions and millions of viewers and listeners that we have. I mean, it's overwhelming. So what I would like to do is just jump right out of the gate with you. So how we're defining hope now is we're defining hope as a starting point to ignite the fuse to start. And at the same time, once you start on your path, you're going to fail. We're also defining hope as the power, and the Beyond Hope Project is a guide back to your path. So in between there, you're going to figure out a whole bunch of other stuff, and we're going to help you get back to that point.
Beautiful.
So my question for you, the first one is, knowing that definition, could you come up with a time in your life that you would go back and either give yourself a starting point or maybe some advice on what you know now to get back to that path of where you're going?
Well, this question was kind of similar to Power Up. So I was able to prepare for this. And, you know, I thought about it because I've listened to your podcast and I did some reflection on what kind of story am I going to tell? Because clearly I've had to have a lot of those moments and a lot of starts and a lot of stops and redirections. And I think that just comes with the journey of having hope, feeling knocked down, coming back. It's that getting back up, right?
Yeah.
And I had some stories in mind. I have many that date back many years, some that were almost crumbling and crippling to an effect. But I giggled today because today I needed to come back and I needed the hope. Just waking up this morning, right? Just waking up this morning, doing all that I'm doing, loving the life that I have. I still have these moments that nothing is technically going wrong, but inside my body, I feel a sense of anxiety or I feel a sense of judgment about myself and how I'm showing up. I feel, oh, I'm not doing enough. I could be doing more. I need to go do this, or I need to be that, or, oh my gosh, I have this massive to-do list. How am I ever going to get it done? Right. And I step outside of kind of that heart space. I step outside of what my true intention here in life is, which is to lead with love and to feel aligned and connected and kind of be on that path. Right. So I have a lot of stories, but it's the day-to-day real practice that we're all having to do.
Right.
To come back to center. And in that moment, I just doubled down. I spent more time meditating. I spent more time journaling, and I gave myself some space to process it all out on paper and to come back to my path, love, the connected point where I feel most aligned so that I could step out into my day with that energy and not in a completely chaotic, stressed out state.
Right.
And I think that leaves a big impact.
Yeah, absolutely. That's cool. Well, it's really cool that you have like such high self-awareness of what's going on. And you mentioned something there about being crippled down sometimes where you don't want to move. And I think that most people that listen to these types of messages, they think that you magically have figured out some secret. Could you maybe take us back to a time where if somebody is new to this idea of being self-aware of what it might look like, what it might feel like, and how do you explain how important it is to face that fear in those moments?
To face the fear of getting to know yourself?
Yeah.
Gosh, it's scary. It's a
Right.
scary space. I think one of the scariest things is that moment you identify, oh, I don't know anything about myself. Back when I was 24, 5, I had this moment where I realized I don't even know what I'm interested in. I don't know what passions I have. All I've been doing is checking the boxes my entire life and performing to the external expectations that are kind of placed on me. Get good grades, be the best at sports, do everything in your power to perform at the highest level, get a great job, all of those check boxes.
Absolutely.
And then you're going to get married and you're going to have a house and you're going to have kids and the blah, 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 blah. So I was doing a really good job checking those boxes. But then I realized I didn't know anything about myself. And the things I did know, like I love my family. I want to spend time with my parents and my sister and my friends and family. I wasn't doing any of that because I was spending so much time committed to work and work hard and hustle the path. And I felt sick.
Right.
I just felt ill. And I knew I had this one moment where I just said, if I keep doing this, I'm going to die before I'm 50.
Right.
And it was one of the hardest moments to be like, well, that sucks to hear in my internal voice.
Right.
But I knew in that moment, okay, now I've got to start changing something.
Right.
And that then started me on the path of just start asking questions. Ask one question. In our work with strategic planning for life, and this is one of my favorite things, is that we start with what makes you feel alive. What gives you joy? And starting there doesn't feel so daunting. It doesn't feel so like, oh, I have so much work to do. Yeah. It kind of feels like hope.
Yeah.
Like, oh, let me just build on what's already working and I can expand in that state. And then maybe some of the other things that aren't working start to fall away.
Right.
And that's where I started. Yeah. I just started learning about myself. What do I like? What do I not like?
Right.
What do I want to do more of? What do I want to do less of? And then that fear of looking down that barrel of I don't know anything about myself started to dissipate.
Yeah.
Felt easier.
Felt easier, right. I think that's there's so much beauty in that, because what I tend to tell people very much along the same lines is that it's amazing how much I like myself based off of everything I hated myself about. That in that digging through all that fear was almost like the golden nuggets that it was ignoring the whole time.
Yeah.
And I think that, could you maybe talk a little bit about the idea of like, once you do start going down there and you fail, the days that you wake up, and how important it is to not just kick yourself and think that you're a failure. I'm sure you experienced it. I know I've experienced it. I would just love to hear your perspective of something like that.
Do you still kick yourself every once in a while for a moment?
Yeah, a little bit, until I wake myself up and be like, dude, what the hell? Like, that is not your story. Like, but at the beginning, it was hard. I mean, because it felt like I was doing nothing but failing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's the point, right? It's good for the listeners to hear you say and to hear me say, if they're facing that big fear, to say, we still kick ourselves.
Oh, yeah.
Frequently.
Absolutely.
But I think the trick is going from how much time does it take you to kick yourself and then to recalibrate and to come back to that path of hope. Right. And so for me, I remember it took me a long time to kind of come back. And I really went off course. I really allowed people's judgments. I can remember when I eventually started making the changes that I needed to make, because I had established some sense of self, I realized that I needed to make a change in my career to start living more in alignment with what was true for me. And one day I made a pretty brash decision to leave the job that I was in. And I gave my 2 weeks notice. And I remember, I'm in my mid-20s, I call my mom. I say, Mom, I quit my job. And she was like, Krista, what are you going to do? And I was like, I don't know, but I'll figure it out.
Right.
And it was the worst logical decision, which Phil, who has been on the podcast, would reflect. I'm very good at making some of those decisions. I'm very spontaneous when it comes to like how I feel and my intuitive knowing. I didn't know that then. I was just kind of flying by the seat of my pants. Yeah. But I believed in myself, and I did feel that decision was true. So I just went for it. And I gave myself a 30-day sabbatical to figure out my life. I was going to figure it out in 30 days, which I did figure out a lot.
Right.
And all of those things are still true today. And in fact, those 30 days, the framework I put myself through turned into the work that we do today,
Right.
the foundations of what we do today. And it's all around self-awareness. And at that time, I decided I'm going to go be a coach. I was 27 at the time, and I wanted to be a life coach.
Yeah.
So you can imagine the looks that I got.
Sure.
Like, what do you even know about life?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I felt all of that judgment. I felt the weight. I felt everyone's kind of scrutiny about, well, what do you know?
Right.
Who are you to go do that thing? And I went off course big time. I would really question myself. And I would let that take weeks at a time. That I would kick myself. That was a bad decision. I shouldn't have done that. I should go get a job. I should change course completely and not listen to myself. And now at this stage, if I could go back to that time, I would tell her, stay on that path.
Right.
No matter what you do, if you feel like you're hopping off of it, come back.
Right.
Go back to it
as
quickly as you can. And now today, I feel like I've shortened that time frame, and I still kick myself for things again and again, like I said from this morning, but I come back quicker.
Yeah,
more easily.
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally want to echo some of that in there because you said so much good. I hope that everybody will go back and listen to that again because there were so many good things in there. But I will say one thing that in there that you said that really resonates with me because I know that exact feeling is that everybody's looking for that secret piece. And what's really funny about it is that it's always the starting point and it's your voice. Because the thing that doesn't change through all of your failures is, you said it exactly, it was that voice continuing to show up and you go off course. But, I equate that, you call it love, right? So you can have all this thing, but love is always going to be chilling, waiting for you. And it's going to be it's like a dog. You come home, it's like the best friend wagging his tail, being like, where you been? I've been here waiting for you. I knew you had to go do this over here, but I was sending out the beacon for you to come back. And it eventually does roll back through there. So, just really important to echo that back for everybody to listen to that is that you already know what you want to do.
The voice is there.
Yes.
It's already
there.
whispering.
Yes.
We call it the whispers.
Yeah.
Oprah says the voice will start in a whisper.
Yes.
Then it will start to get a little bit louder. Eventually it will smack you in the face and eventually it will hit you like a train.
Yep.
So you either listen to it or you wait until you get hit by the train. And then eventually you have to let it come out.
I talk about that all the time. I'm like, I took a brain tumor, right?
Right.
I mean, I ignored it. I went off course. I thought there's no way I deserve it. All of the BS. I mean, I went down that path. Same sort of similar thing to you is I, in my early 20s was like, I am done working for anybody. I'll never work for anybody again. It was just but I didn't like myself. So I didn't know how to navigate that stuff. And so in a lot of ways, it's weird. I think when we're younger and we have those impulse, that I think what makes people like us a little different is that we trust that. We don't know why.
Right.
But we
no
trust
idea.
it. Yeah. And everybody thinks you're freaking crazy.
Right.
And I think maybe if you could talk about that idea a little bit about explaining how everybody else's opinions about what you're going to do don't matter, and that they're basing their judgment off of their situation, not what you're going off of.
I just had this conversation the other day with a client. Their fears.
Yes.
Their fears. And I said, it would be like as a young child, you looking at your parents and saying, I'm going to walk into that dark woods. Are you cool with that? And they're going to be like, no, my job is to keep you safe. If I'm your friend or family member, my job is to protect you. My job is to make sure that our relationship is intact. And I only know you as you right now, right? Or if you're doing that, what does that say about me? And it's so much a perception and a reflection of the other person and doesn't necessarily have anything to do with you. And if it does, they're likely not the right community for you and where you're going. And being able to let go of that, really powerful. Being able to let go of some of those relationships that are no longer in support. We call them the F yeah friends. The people who are like, yeah, go do that. I'm in support. I have no idea what it means or how it's going to work, but I support you in that. There was a post that recently, sometimes I get the Instagram wisdom. You every so often hit a post where you're like, wow, that really hits home. I'm
Yeah.
glad I was scrolling in that moment. And it was this view of mountains, and they're panning over mountains. And it said, you have one person, two people that you need to make proud in your life. And it's not your mom, it's not your dad, it's not your husband, not your wife, not your kids. It is your 8-year-old version of yourself and your 80-year-old version of yourself.
Yeah.
And I felt that was so true and powerful.
Yeah.
And made me go, yes, all these people matter in their relationship. Our relationships with them matter. But those two relationships, that's in that whisper that kind of spans that gap.
Yeah.
That's the most important.
Yeah. Oh yeah. There's been so many times where I've imagined if I could sit across the table from 8-year-old me. I would say for me, it was probably more 6 is when I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a storyteller.
That's impressive.
And if I could sit across the table, knowing what he felt like then, and tell him what I'm doing now, he would just be like, "No way, dude, no way." And I think a lot of us, if we really did that, we would be shocked. That if you sat down and thought about where you were, unless you somehow were born into just a perfect world, which I'm sure it happens for some people, but I'm going to argue that they also have issues too.
Yeah.
That it's amazing when you do take the time to reflect. So are there any sort of things that you do that somebody else could pick up on that if they're wanting to just start that first step down that path of like actually learning, oh, wait, what is, when they're looking around to hear the voice? Because to me, I don't know about it for you, but for me, it really sounded like an audible voice. Like, what the hell was that? What if somebody does hear that? Like, what would be some advice that you'd have for them to step into that bravery of trying?
I think the first thing is just trying to hear the voice is the first step. And so you have an audible, you hear it. I have an audible, I hear it. Others might have more of a vision. They might see it in a movie in their mind's eye, right? It's hard to say that. It's all the clairvoyance and all this.
Sure.
Someone else might just feel it very deeply, right? So that message might be coming through in all these different senses, but trying to peel back the layers and go quiet enough first to feel it. You can ask yourself questions like, what did I love when I was little? What was the whisper when I was little? What was I playing make-believe? What did I do when I played make-believe? What did I love doing? I loved art and baseball, and he's still in that world, right? He's still experiencing that in different forms. Right. For myself, I wanted to be a mom, and I wanted to at one point be a vet, but what I realized is there's just this strong empathic bone that needed to be taken care of and honored, right? But I also wanted to be a businesswoman, be able to be supportive of the people in my life and do it in that way. So seeing those things come to life is really cool. Another question you can ask is, what would 80-year-old version, we use the deathbed activity in our work, which is meant to like spark you into the end and look back on what would I be most proud of? It's a great question. What would make me proud? And that can help you tap into it. That also helps to kind of slim down and simplify that fear a little bit to say, well, what if I do that? Like, what if I just take one step? And I think that's the one thing that we get caught up in the most is, well, once I hear the voice, what do I want to do about that? But, oh gosh, what if I did the whole thing right now? It would all just come crumbling down. I mean, that's very scary. Yeah. Like, what if this went wrong? And what if this went bad? So one thing we like to practice is, but what's the smallest, simplest, easiest thing you can do right now to bring that out from inside of you out into the world? One of the easiest steps, just write it down on paper. Right. Just write it down. Yeah. You can even burn it if you don't want anybody to find it, right? You can put it up into the cosmos after you do it. Yeah. But just getting it out, write it down, put it somewhere, right? And then take the next step. Right. And then the next step. And I think once you get the comfort and confidence in taking each step, then that momentum starts to build, right? And it starts to feel a little easier. And it almost becomes who you are at that point. Like, I do these things because I know it's so important in my life. And I don't want to I want to live that trajectory, not the other trajectory of, well, if I don't do it, then I just stay on a path. Do I want that path? Right. So it makes it worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's so much like actionable stuff in getting that out of your head as this big monster or whatever you've made it up to be, and to get it on a piece of paper where it doesn't look so scary. And side note, which is kind of funny, baseball and art was my two things. And I
Really?
at one point in time wanted to be a vet as well.
Oh
so
my
it's kind of
gosh.
weird. Like both of you guys, this is maybe why
Collective.
this is why we all click. We all
vibe.
had the same sort of stuff. Yeah.
Totally.
8th grade, I wanted to be a vet until I went with him on a career day and he shoved his arm up a cow's butt. And I was like, yeah, I don't want to be a vet.
Exactly. Mine was that I knew that I had to do the put them down, and I was like, oh no.
Oh yeah.
I'm glad I didn't get to
we
the
didn't
butt
get
part.
to that part. It was a cow, and just he's put on his glove. I was like, what is he doing? And then I'm like, oh gosh, I'm good. I don't want to be a vet.
I'm seeing the day-to-day of that, and I don't want to do that. That's amazing. Yeah. But, well, that's another action. You can go and job shadow and experience. It doesn't have to be job, but life shadow or put yourself in the experience. When Phil and I were wanting to move, and we didn't know at the time we wanted to build a house, but we went to different areas and we just felt energetically, how does this area feel to us? What feels energetic?
Yeah.
And the place that we drove through that we were like, gosh, how do we live here? Doesn't look like we'll ever be able to.
Yeah.
2 years later, a plot of land comes open on that road.
Yeah.
It's like we energetically knew,
yeah.
but we didn't know how it's all going to come together. So it's like, don't get caught up in the logistics and don't be held back by the logistics because you don't know when it's going to unfold.
Right. Yeah. That is huge. The idea of getting out of your head in the real world and stop thinking you have to create that. It's almost like I feel like that anytime I reflect back on stuff that I quote unquote created, I wasn't actually creating anything. What I stopped doing was creating.
Interesting.
And I just started being me. And then all of a sudden, a phone would ring or an email would come through or whatever. And it's like, but here's where my catch was, and see if you can relate to this, would be I wasn't at the point yet where I valued myself enough. So what I would do is when that would happen, think, oh my God, it shouldn't be that easy. So therefore I should blow this up. And I would go through this, amazing stuff, self-sabotage, amazing stuff, self-sabotage. People would be like, I've been lucky enough to create stuff that has sold at any retailer anywhere. And people would be like, oh my God, your stuff is in, Walmart and it's gonna be cool. And I was like, yeah, no, I don't deserve it. Amazing things like that. So have you ever had any experience with that sort of stuff?
Oh my gosh, all the time. Right. I think when we're attached to the outcome and how we think it should be in the creation, I have to create it in the way that I see it, in the way that I want. Then you're not open to receiving what is actually coming into you. And then you block it through self-sabotage or righteousness. No, it needs to be this way. I need to have it happen my way instead of, wow, something's coming to me and I can receive that and I can go step into that flow.
Right.
I can step into the flow. Our hardest points are when we step out of the flow.
Right.
And then we just start, it's just friction. Yeah. It's like friction and tension with reality and nothing's working. I always say it's like when you're at that moment where you say nothing is working. Exactly. Yeah. Right. You've either judged yourself into it or you've put yourself in that moment because you think you need it to be. And I do this all the time. I step out of that and I can always tell because I'm outside of that flow and actually not receiving anything inwardly or being open to those things.
Yeah.
Now, I will say from a self-awareness standpoint, I think everyone operates differently in this way. So if you get into human design or gene keys, energetics, how you operate within the world, I think that those things are really valuable to know about yourself if you are someone who is meant to kind of respond to the cues of life, or if you're someone who's meant to create and drive initiatives forward, or if you're someone who's just meant to reflect everything that's around you.
Yeah.
Different ways of operating in the world, which is, I think, super interesting, but it helps you to realize, do I just wait till something comes in and then I respond to that?
Yeah.
And that's where ease is. And I think that's where people get stuck is they're like, it has to be hard. I have to hustle. I have to grind. But the best things that have happened have been easeful.
Yeah.
They've been easy to do.
Yes.
It just kind of flows in motion.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to say that to be, I think that sounds a little woo, positive, cool.
Yeah.
But I encourage everyone listening, think back to some of the best things that have happened in your life.
Right.
Did they come because you hustled hard and you were grinding away? Or because they were intuitive choices that felt really good and aligned and you just said yes and got out of your own way?
Right.
Right.
Yeah. And I appreciate you saying that because one of the major there's two things that you said in there, but one of the big ones is that at the top of when I started mapping out what Beyond Hope Project was going to be, number one rule is it's 100% anti-guru. And I feel like that we're inundated with these gurus that says, hustle your face off and outwork everybody and blah, blah. And the thing is, I think what people don't understand and see that is they're comparing themselves to that. But what they're not understanding is that's what works for that person.
Yes.
It does not mean it has to work for you. You don't have to hire a team of people to film you and all these different things to find happiness and all of these things. And I think that's one of the biggest chunks that people miss out on is they think that you can force it. And then the other part that I'm going to form this into one long thing and you can just comment
Perfect.
on it.
I love it.
Was the other part was going into Beyond Hope Project was I took for the first time ever, like a personality type test. And Phil and I on our last hike were talking about it. And
what'd you take?
If I can't think of the name of it, but he was the exact same thing as me. And come out like I was a maverick. I can't even think of the name. It's a P.
A predictive index.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I took that and I was like, that was the first time in a working setting that I understood how I actually function. And I'm like, oh my God, it made so much sense. So it is weird. Even somebody that I feel like I'm pretty self-aware to be even aware more, or whatever that, it's amazing the layers that you think. And that's one of the things I've been writing about this week is that I thought the tumor was the clarity, but it's crazy how many other layers have started to fall. And I realized that awareness is the same sort of way.
Yeah. That was a starting point. That was a jumping off point, right? That you made a choice. Right. I'm going to go inward now. Right. I'm going to start going into the depths of what's up. Phil and I talk about it's a lifelong journey. Yeah. If I'm not learning more about myself and the world around me when I'm on my deathbed, then I've done something really wrong. Right. I should be always learning another layer because that's what life does. Different circumstances, different seasons of life unlock different parts of us, right? And help us to learn deeper and deeper layers of who we are and how we operate and how we connect with the world. I just think it's one of the coolest journeys I've ever been on is this deepening self-awareness. And that's to bring it back to being the guru, be your own guru, right? Choose to go down the path, choose to go inward and start asking yourself the questions. Because if you have those tools, no matter the complexities of life, because life is almost always going to get more complex until it maybe doesn't. And I'm not sure when that happens, but life shows up in more complex ways. So if you have your own toolbox of, oh, I kind of know this about myself. I know how I operate in the world. I always have more room to grow and we always should, right? We always should be learning. But if I can come back to that, then I can get through anything. Yeah. I can navigate any situation because I've developed my own self-awareness. I'm not taking from someone else and saying, no, you should navigate it this way because that's what worked for someone else. Right. But that ultimately doesn't work for me. So you're a maverick. I'm not, right? I am the complete opposite of Phil, which has made for very interesting relationship and business dynamics. Yeah. And this is also very important in real life because you're going to be different from your family and your friends. And that's amazing and so good because then you can collaborate once you know the differences. Yeah. But you have to be your own guru. You have to know yourself and allow the other people to be themselves. Yeah. So you can be in your own flow and take care of your own stuff, but also come together in really meaningful ways.
Yeah. And I think when you know that part of you too, it's wild how much of those parts that you were missing start to show up. And it's almost like I have found every layer that kind of comes through. It's almost like a new like blinder went off and it's like, oh my God, like that you see people in a different light. You do. And like you mentioned earlier, and it does suck. Realize some people just don't fit anymore. It doesn't mean, and this was a big one that took me some time to really tackle. And I'm sure you have some thoughts on this too, is that I thought if I drew a boundary, that meant I didn't like that person anymore. Right? Yeah. Or I wished bad on them. And I think a lot of that has to do with like me as a kid and the way I felt and whatever. It always comes back to us being kids.
It does. It all stems back to our wiring, our original wiring.
And that's not true. It just means that you have become a different spot. And I do have to give Phil credit for a lot of opening the door for that for me. On our talks he just was saying like you keep reaching down, stop. And it was just that simple statement. It made sense at the time. And so, I just love to hear your thoughts on like how evolution in yourself works, and also what, just echo that back, in some sort of way of like, knowing that it doesn't mean if you want to quit your job that you hate everybody that works there, or if you want to, you've had enough of somebody's whatever, like, doesn't mean that you wish bad. Like, I'm sure you deal with that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a great practice.
Yeah.
I love it. But I think it comes back to, as you deepen and as you take those layers and have those unlocks, at each of those steps, you do things differently, ideally, right? Our work, we believe you have to be intentional. You have to have this deep level of self-awareness. You have to understand who you are, what you value most, and really what you want in life. And those core elements help you to take action from that place, which we call integration. So as you have more clarity of self and a deepening self-awareness, you start making changes, ideally, because self-awareness is great, but if you don't actually use it, then it means nothing, right? So, and I'll also give credit to Phil because he's helped me to be so focused on action and integration and doing it with speed and agility. I'm not the most agile person. I was a swimmer. I spent my whole life in the water. So he has helped me to think about that. But that idea of action, that's what creates change and transformation. That can be in really small ways, and that can be in really big ways, especially over time, which means that the things and the people around you are going to experience something different of you. And then you're going to experience something different of them. And there's natural evolution that needs to happen there. So I think that it's such a great opportunity to come back to an audit, let's say, on a regular cadence. We do it on an annual basis. You can do it at any time. This is a very easy tool. If anyone's dealing with relationship boundary issues or energetic issues with people, do a little T chart on a piece of paper. On one side, write drives, and on the other side, write drains. This is a very common tool used by a lot of people, but particularly focus on relationships. Like, what relationships are driving you right now in this season of life, right? Some are going to drive you because they're new and inspiring and they're aspirational and where you want to be. Some are going to drive you because they're your kind of mainstays, your evergreens, the people who've always been there and they'll be there till the day you die, right? Those people give to you in a very different way that no matter what happens, they're there for you, right? But then there are also going to be people who fall on that list that are drains, right? That they aren't giving you good energy. That doesn't mean they can't, but it does give you the opportunity to ask the question of, what does this relationship need? Sometimes that relationship needs a level of acceptance from you to say, this is where we're at and I'm okay with it and I'm going to leave it as is and we're just going to work through it, right? Sometimes it needs change, like boundaries, and that's okay. In fact, it's Abby Wambach and Glennon Doyle said something on a podcast that really stood out to me. And they said, when there's conflict, when there's like a boundary that you need to set with somebody, if you lean into that, that means you value the relationship. That confrontation actually creates healthier relationships if you're willing to communicate and work on it. And so I was like, that's such a valuable perspective. And I think that the best relationships in my life have become the best relationships because we've had conflict or boundaries and had to communicate those things. Right. And then others on the final end, you have to release them and let go and find peace in being able to exit, which is not always, it doesn't have to be a harsh or daunting experience. It can sometimes just be a simple let go and your paths don't cross again for a long time, but maybe they come back together. I think we kind of flow in and out of people's lives. As we go.
That was a huge one for me to overcome and come to terms with, because growing up for me, I had no friends. I mean, nobody that I would really say like, oh yeah, they were a friend. It always seemed like it came with a catch, right? And so it kind of always made my guard go up. And so then when I would let somebody in that circle, it was like, okay, like you almost look for the problems instead of like looking for the good and stuff. And I think that, a lot of what, we've talked about here can really help people is understanding is like, you get what you look for, right?
Such a good,
it's like, if you want to see a shitty life, guess what? Right. And I think that's the beauty of it is like to kind of just circle back to what you said earlier, when you called your mother to tell her you quit your job, the first thing was her fears. Oh my God, but you were so unsure but sure. And like, so that sort of notion of, as we become self-aware, for me has been a huge thing. Is in that self-awareness, we start to figure out that, like, wow, this has always been here. And, like, maybe I should lean into this now.
Yeah.
And I the audit thing was great because I did it with myself, and it was just like, what parts of me,
so good,
yeah. So I think that the more people, God, I mean, there's so much good stuff that happened here. Like, this is crazy because before we started, I was told we talked about, like, we've never really talked before.
Never.
And it was like, but at the same time, I knew it would be great. But it's just wild to, like, I think you're the first guest also that I've never really actually talked with. So you're like the first of many things here.
Very cool.
But yeah, it's really cool that we've covered all these things, and I'm just trying to, like, I've been sitting here trying to think, how do we wrap this up? Because there's so many good parts in here. So I'm going to throw it back at you and be like, and then I'll circle back with, like, making sure that you check out all the stuff Chris is doing and everything. But if you could, like, really just drop a knowledge bomb on everybody that is right now listening to this, driving to a job they hate, looking in the mirror and thinking they're worthless. Stand on that scale one more time and going, like, why in the hell I'm doing all this work? What would be something that you would say to them that would just get them to understand that it's not your timeline that's what's important? That, it's different for everybody.
First, I would say you're enough. You're enough.
Yeah.
It's good. I give you grace. I give you grace for wherever you are. I think that we live in the society of do more, be more. You should have all this stuff, so many expectations. And I think that one of the most powerful kind of relieving allowances and gifts for myself is that grace, and for others is to say, you know what, I'm doing great. There's a whole comedy series on, like, you're doing great. And I love that. I'm doing great.
Yeah.
I'm doing great. I'm here. I'm present. I'm listening to this amazing podcast with this amazing host who's, like, giving me such good energy and doing this amazing work. Like, I'm doing enough. So that's the first part, right? Do that. And then I would say that the next part is that what you have to do next is not that much. Right. You just have to start thinking, what do I want? Right? If I'm standing on that scale, which I often do, weight is a common experience for all of us. I will get upset, but I also say, I don't want a 6-pack because that means I have to give up my wine. So I'm not giving up my wine. Even if someone else, some health guru is going to tell me, well, you need to give up your wine so that you can be as skinny and what society's expectation of health looks like. Right. No, thank you. Yeah. And in fact, if you watch the most recent Netflix docuseries about living to be 100 years for the blue zones, they talk about you can have one glass of wine, just not two. And that's very healthy. And I'm like, yes, I've been doing it right all along.
You've been a health nut all along.
I've been a health nut all along. So there's, like, validation in that. Yeah. There's so many things that we're all doing right and that we're all enough. And that all you have to do is start visualizing what it is you actually want and then start taking those steps. And the one piece I was going to kind of roll back, surround yourself with community. You hit on it with Phil. We're hitting on it just by being in each other's presence. Surround yourself with your FYF friends. Surround yourself with people who are going to encourage you and support you in those ways, who are going to give you tools and help, and they know what they're doing, but they're also believing in you to know yourself well enough, that they're trusting you to kind of follow your path. Yeah. And I think that that's everything. Community and immersion in what you really want, and just taking those itty-bitty steps that compound over time.
Wow. I mean, if we didn't just drop, the most amazing knowledge bombs throughout that whole thing, I don't know. They must be listening to something else. But guys, here's the deal. Chris and I both have a podcast, and we need your help. And so that somebody needs to hear the stuff that we just said. I'm going to guess you also needed to hear it, but you also know 5, 6, 7 other people that need to hear it as well. So do us a favor, like and share it. Subscribe to each one of ours. The Unlock podcast, Alan Key, all of her links and everything are going to be in the descriptions. It's going to be on a YouTube channel. It'll be all in there. Make sure that you go follow, jump on the stuff she's doing. She is powerful. I can feel it. I'm in the room with her. But she's really a special person that you really need to follow and invite into your life, and stop listening to all these people that are telling you how to do it, and tag onto people that are like giving you real advice. The one thing I would say that about both of us is we are actual real people. Yeah. We don't claim to be superheroes. And in that process, what you're going to get is on this authenticity that you may not be able to heal. So guys, again, this podcast is about driving hope. It's that starting point. So if you needed a spark today, I think we gave it to you. If you need to figure your way back to the path, I know that we showed you multiple ways back there. You're doing a great job being a human. Just keep doing it, because life just sometimes gets hard, but it's by showing up every day that you get to do those things. So make sure you follow both of us, like it, subscribe, and let everybody know the magic that we're making. So we'll see you guys. All right.
Amazing.
Foxland Media. Think big.